plans for Saskatchewan, part of one, go for that because I've got a lot of information like to give you some sparks. But yeah, anyways, like I said, we'll be out here definitely within the hour. So.
I wonder what resistance is fertile is all about.
We have a tech problem.
What's up?
Wheeler 200. Can you guys go?
What do you need? What do they need?
I don't know. Just go.
You want to go? Or do you want me to?
It's a computer is not working.
Yeah, he talked to me. I didn't know what to do, but yeah, maybe you can go check it out.
If you can do anything, change it.
Okay, that's what I told. Is it with Victoria? The person that was with Victoria?
She's from the UC Clean Energy.
Oh no, this is another one.
What is it, Wheeler?
Wheeler 200.
Go.
Go. You're really 10 minutes late.
Okay. If you can't figure it out, have them go to another room.
Let me grab my.
Okay, yeah, you can ask me.
And what's another room option?
Just any room that's open nearby.
Keep it in mind, because that's really my intention here. And then skedaddle off to I know there's indoor composting, indoor gardening, and that also sounds really cool to us.
Yes, go for it. Let me know if you want me to get it to introduce you, get it started, or you can just start.
I'd like to see you do that. I don't need that though. I think I'm going to study.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Hi, you guys. I am going to start on my public banking presentation. And when I start, I would like to know who here is from Berkeley? Who's here from the area? Well, and how far away are we coming from? How far south? Santa Monica? Santa Barbara. Slow. That's beautiful. I've always wanted to go to Santa Monica, actually. Sounds like innovative people that live on the beach. Cool. The LA city that you can bike in, right? Okay, cool. Well, I'd like to start this out with a preview of what you're going to get here today. This is someone else's presentation. It's Jedediah and Rick. And they came to Chico. Oh, hi, I'm Kate Wright. And a couple months ago, Chico State put on This Way to Sustainability. And it was much like this weekend. It was a weekend of a variety of workshops. We heard about the positive sides of nuclear energy, how to build your own solar panels, aquaponics, like there was earlier today. Did you know that one, by the way? The aquaponics? It sounds so cool, too. And so with the idea in mind that there's a lot going on today, I really do hope some of you will be able to get out of here early and go check out something else, because we've got a lot of really interesting things going on today. So I'm going to skedaddle on through that. This presentation was initially a proposal for the state of Nevada to create their own public bank. And they used North Dakota, which has the only public bank in America, as an example. So I took that, I stripped it down, and I'm going to tell you what public banks are and why they are a viable option for building resilient communities. I'll turn down the music, but I'm going to leave it on, actually. Is that what the point is for? Okay. Actually, maybe I won't. It's a little fast. Okay. That was much better. All right, you guys. So, hi, I'm Kate, and I'm from Butte College. If you haven't heard of Butte, it's in Butte County, and our our neighbor is Chico State. So that introduction. What are public banks? They are owned by a country, a state, a county, or a city. And the idea is it's similar to a community bank, where there's dialogue between the banker and each individual going in. And usually that individual is a student looking to take out student loans, or a business, or a business leader, or an entrepreneur who has a vision of a business or an NGO that they want to create. And we as students, or we as visionaries, don't always have the capital to make this great idea happen. But often we might have a business plan, which is required when you go in to get a loan. We might have a good idea. We might have a vision for the very ideal spot in our community that we've passed on the street that has been empty with a for rent sign on it. We might have a good idea of like how that is, all the potential there, what is a good business idea to go in there. And with that dialogue, with a detailed business plan, you present it often to your community bank or a public bank, and you might be able to get the ball rolling. And okay, so public banks are going to keep the money local. The public banks do that by investing in the community. Transparency is required by law, and directed to serve the public good does not need to maximize profits because you don't have people working, pushing paper, saying I have a job at the bank and I just tell you what to do. And so there's no extra monies that when you have interest on, I'm not even going to go into this is beginning for further along. So public banks, there is one public bank in America, and it is in North Dakota. And so we're not really familiar with public banks while you guys are all here, but it has worked in a lot of places. And you guys might have heard about the great banks in Iceland and Germany when this huge economy crisis was really showing its face in 2010, 2011. A lot of countries in the EU were looking to Germany to get some backup because as far as their economy was seen as pretty strong. And one of those reasons is that Germany has a really detailed three-tiered system of a public bank. So right now I'm telling you these things. I know it's not the detail of what one is, but I would like to illustrate that it is working, and as we go further in, keep in mind the potential at different levels, maybe the agricultural sector, or the sector as being a student needing student loans at maybe lower interest rates. That is what we're looking at here as a benefit of the public bank. Okay, and again, before we dive in, a lot of the public banks works on credit, and that actually is a nice massage to keep money flowing. And credit as a concept, I haven't agreed with before. So prior to 2 months ago, prior to 2 weeks ago, before I even knew I was able to give this presentation, I don't like the idea of credit because it's not tangible. It's not a rock I can hold in my hand. It is some image. And as I'm sure a lot of us know, that is a way, 93% of US dollars is not hard money. And I don't just mean like that we're off the gold standard, but I mean as far as all the numbers that say we have this much debt, we have this much gross GDP, it is numbers that have been entered into a computer and said we've loaned out this much money, or you have this much credit, or we're speculating that this will be returned to us in so many months, in so many years. And that's why, even though I'm standing behind and I'm presenting on public banks, it's still something that is human run, and wherever there's money, whenever there's a collection of money, which is power, you still have to watch out, because that is an institution that can be infiltrated and taken advantage of. And again, so because that is true, I want to say that's why I really dig public banks, because every public bank is mandated for all those actions to be transparent. I know a lot of us have heard about divestment, and I know we're working on that, and one thing at Butte College that we've run into is we wanted to even check, is our college, is Chico State invested in any like major banks such as Bank of America? Wells Fargo, or indirect, and by investing in those banks, indirectly invested in the Dirty Dozen. And even though it turns out Chico State isn't, it was hard for us to get that information because the actions is not transparent. At Butte College, when we wanted to find out, like, okay, there is a $1 million deposit for student, like, that comes out of our tuition, and that's for student services. How is that broken up? And then we asked for a printout to explain that, and it said it's half of that goes to maybe public works, buying, restoring the library, our textbooks that are open access, but it didn't break it down transaction by transaction, individual by individual. It didn't break it down by teachers' bonuses, administrative fees. With public bank, that's all. I think that's really important. I think that has to do with truth, keeps people accountable, makes your transactions honest, and even if they're not honest, someone else can see that, and you have a say, again, because of that dialogue that's going on between the banker and the individual, between the business, which is an employee and employer, and people have access to a better sense of what's going on. Okay, so the impacts of the current banking system. A recent example we saw was the bubble of the real estate bubble. Before, though, we saw that with the stock market crash in the 30s. Right now, I have a bank account with Wells Fargo. And before I turned 18, I would get interest on my money. And that's because Wells Fargo, being a nationwide bank, could take my money and invest it in different stocks, could bet with my money, and if they bet right, if they happen to know what's going on, made a right choice in the right company, the right innovation, they made money on it, and because they took my money and loaned it out, entered those numbers in the computer, I got a little cash. And that stops once you're 18, you become an adult, and when you start paying to keep your money in certain banks. But the people that created this presentation called that casino banking, because it's not your decision. It's your money, but it's not your decision where it's being invested. Again, that's why we're doing the divestment campaign, because indirectly I have my money in B of A, Wells Fargo, and I'm investing in Cracker, for example. The too big to fail, have you guys heard of that catchphrase? It's too big to fail, which means this bank is invested in so many different facets of our economy. It's invested in everything from like the John Deere tractors to the pipes that we're moving in to the ground. It's invested in printing our textbooks, in the teachers who are being paid to write the textbooks. And if one bank invested in all of that fails, our whole economy, so many people are affected by that. And the idea of a public bank is too small to fail. Again, it's very small. And another way it stays small is it's not an individual talking to the public bank. It's almost a community bank's bank. And I'll get into that. There's something called the Dodd-Frank Act. And has anyone heard of that? It was passed in 2010, or at least it began in 2010, and definitely was passed in 2011. And it was supposed to be a reform of the structure of banks, what they're allowed to do. And really it was a change in habits of banks. And what I mean by that is instead of instigating new regulations, it created, for example, a committee that is supposed to give suggestions on what the banks are doing. So a lot of times we'll see these acts and say, this act was passed with this intention. And more, if you read between the lines, you'll see that it's what they're passed is someone to make suggestions on. And it's nothing that, and the suggestion, that keyword is important because legally, they're not, if they don't act on those suggestions, they're not violating a yes or no law. Do this, do not do this. Again, the local money being seldom invested in the local economy. Earlier when I said you as a small business might have an idea for a specific spot on your block, like this would be great for a community kitchen. You as an individual passing, walking on those streets, you see that. You are talking with your peers elders, other people that are part of your farmer's market, for example. And you have that vision, but your money, again, if you're depositing your money in B of A and Wells Fargo, it's not going to that vision. It's not staying local. It's going to go to the John Deere's or It's going to go to hash brown. It's going to go to electronic arts, a bigger corporation, just because those are the companies shaking hands. Those are the companies that have that dialogue going on. Here where it says local investments are subject to major losses, I'm going to go into that further, but that is that individual saying, okay, I've worked a part-time job while going to school, and I'm going to invest this money, say, in gas to go up to the CSSC meeting. And that's probably a large chunk of like your weekend wages, right? Well, on an economy in your small town or even in Pasadena, it's still an individual taking that enterprise on. And without the support of a bank who really understands what you're doing, it's hard. And if your bank or if your business doesn't succeed, it's a major loss compared to what other people with more resources might suffer. I saw a lot of head nods when I said that 93% of our money is just numbers on a computer. So I'm not going to reiterate this, but currently only 7% is actually dollars and change. The rest are those bookkeeping entries. So when I went to This Way to Sustainability conference, these were some of the numbers that really made me jump on wanting to promote public banks. If you look at the dates, 2001, 2010, these are the community banks, which are not public banks. In North Dakota and other states such as Wyoming and South Dakota, and then far right says the US. And this is what these different states were able to lend out during these different times. If you notice, in 2010, when the crisis was big, making all the headlines, North Dakota is still going up. It's still doing, it's strong. That really jumped out at me when I saw that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to first slide. What are they? They're owned country, state, county, or city. And when I say a public bank is a bank's bank, I mean that it is not an individual going to a public bank, but you're the individual going to a community bank. Now, even as I'm giving this presentation, the US government is trying to change the definition of community banks. But the idea will remain the same. It's community bank you're going to get your individual loan from, but when the Dodd-Frank Act passed, it created a ratio of how much capital every bank has to keep and how much they can give out. That ratio is approximately 1 to 7, I believe. So say I am a community bank, a small town community bank, and I have $30 million. And you for a startup, you need $5 million. That's to rent out a place, put a deposit down on it. That includes buying your inventory, marketing. That might all be funds and fees for a year or two. Well, that ratio of 5 million that you need and the 30 million that I have, if that exceeds the Dodd-Frank ratio, I have to tell you no. And right there, that no is the reason a lot of the stimulus has not gone to the local economy. Like, we need those small businesses cropping up because those small businesses employ students, employ people who have been out of work, employed unskilled labor that is entry-level positions. And when you can't make out that loan for the beginning of a business, how else are we supposed to stimulate our economy? I know there's plenty of ideas, but it's a pretty direct way that is rather sustainable. Digging on the public banks. When this says it does not compete with community banks, what that means is the public bank might sell bonds. And bonds are not money, but you pay money for a certain amount, and it's almost like an IOU. And because the community bank has to maintain that ratio, they can borrow from a public bank. Say you want that 5 million. I can borrow 5 million from the public bank. I can hold on to it and I can extend you that loan, and the ratio remains the same. And that's why public banks are enablers. Also, because public banks are able to give that loan to a community bank doesn't need to give you, as a student loan at such a high interest rate. Also, you can buy down interest rates for business loans and student loans and agricultural loans. Agriculture has a whole different sector. A lot of farmers need to go to an agricultural bank, get an agricultural mortgage, and this too provides capital for people that have to maintain that ratio. Does any of this sound familiar? And are any sparks flying? And are there any questions yet?
I don't know if you covered it because I came a couple minutes late, but I'm wondering the difference between public bank and a credit union. Did you already cover that?
I haven't addressed credit unions, but okay. Credit unions do operate strictly on credit, and a public bank has ability, like in California we have a sales tax, and in Oregon there's no sales tax. Well, like I said, that a public bank can operate by selling bonds, but they can also operate with community consensus to have a tax, and that tax could be on your income, the tax could be on property taxes, it could be sales tax, and that would be a way to generate revenue. And the idea again behind that, which I think I'm going to cover in another slide, but I'm kind of just rolling with it. So the idea is always to keep the capital in the public bank, because the public bank can distribute it to the businesses and to those community banks. The public bank can act as a rock for those credit unions. Again, the roots are in the discussion between the banks and the individuals. And it creates these layers where the individual might talk to the credit union, the individual might talk to the community bank, and the individual might not need a loan, like hard cash, but to act on credit, to buy a car, for example, that you might be able to pay over time. You might not want to take out a direct loan, but you can buy something with credit. There is that difference.
So credit unions, you can't get direct loans?
I think they operate on credit.
Okay. Cool, thanks.
Which acts like a loan, but it's technically different.
Yeah.
And this yup yum. Has anyone read Tom Robbins? Okay, well, I'm wondering if you're digging it, or does it sound good, or would you want to diss it right off the bat? The yup yum one, it says there's only 2 mantras. Yup, yum. Mine is yum. Let's go on. I started this presentation off saying that I initially wasn't a supporter of credit, and I wasn't a supporter of the idea of loans, because it's not tangible, because it's made up money. But if we are working with money, if we're not going to an extreme of, say, a barter system, one thing that's nice about credit is, say, you have a guaranteed job as a student in the summer, or you know you're down for seasonal work, and you will have money coming in. But right now, you need the moped to get across town, to get to your class on time. For whatever reason, public transport won't work, and you want to make a purchase, or you want to pay rent. And credit is really great for that. And again, and that's one reason I dig these now. And again, when I tried to illustrate the idea of having a business idea that you know will work, that you can see how it works in your own community. Credit is really good for that. And in the past decade, we haven't, because of that Dodd-Frank, we haven't been able to give out loans, and people's credit has gone down. People have lost their credibility because of technicalities. The people that first gave this presentation, I said earlier, they're from Nevada, and they're trying to start a public bank in Nevada. There was a survey in Washington of people's needs, what have been met and what have not been met. Another problem with bigger banks, where it says 45% have been delayed or canceled expansion plans for a lack of credit, you might have there's known to be cycles in life, but especially cycles in, say, the real estate market. And spring is known for being a really great time. There's foreclosures in the fall. Springtime is when you paint your house and you put it on the market. If you want to rent it out, for example, a lot of smaller communities, well, if you want to rent out, a lot of students come in the summertime and definitely in August. That's just part of the cycles. It's happened for decades. It's happened for more and more people rent out places. With the 45% delay, that happens from a lack of dialogue. You send your proposal, your business plan, but with the bureaucracy, it either gets pushed on the side or some numbers get crunched and then it gets pushed on the side. Say, this is low priority. And even when there it is, there's a local tribe called the Miner, and they say that the English translation of thinking is chasing the feather. So I just caught the feather, that with those cycles, that's why often timing is really important. If you have the business idea, or you have the house to rent, you have a need for your capital that you're going to use, timing is really crucial. And if it gets delayed, your business plan will fall through. And again, it just perpetuates loss of potential. The dialogue that happens with community banks and public banks is more intimate, more immediate. When they speak of the 41% not being able to acquire inventory, that's inventory for your pet shop down the street. They need feed, they need new canaries, they need someone to clean the animal cages. And if they can't, and they're competing with Petco, who can source their resources from the East Coast, they can lower prices at one store to accommodate for higher prices somewhere else. And as a local, you can't compete with Petco, and you will go out of business if you can't buy your inventory. These percentages just really illustrate the problems businesses are encountering, and these are the problems specifically that a public bank can assist a community bank or a credit union with solving. Here when it says keep the credit flowing, that again is part of the process. I know when I first started college, I would get discovery letters, discovery card letters in the mail saying build your credit with your student college card. And that is part of the process that as I build credit, I can buy more and more on credit. And I am credible, I'm trustworthy, and that is part of the process that eventually, if I do want to take out a student loan for a UC, I can take out more money. But say I lose that credibility, say I'm late, say I have rent suddenly I have to pay for, and I miss the payment on my credit card, my credibility goes down, my credit lowers, the roof isn't below me, falls to the floor, and that stops the credit flow. Then I can know if I'm worried about these everyday things, I can't invest in my local community. I am less likely to shop at the farmer's market. I'm more likely to buy cheap shoes than I am maybe a local artisan. Shoes, bracelets, everyday kind of things that add up. Here when it talks about buying down interest rates, sometimes this is really applicable to mortgages. Sometimes when you take out a mortgage, you have to pay back an interest rate, say at 6%, and that's not feasible, but over time, you can see yourself paying it at 5%. If you pay back the equivalent of 1% of whatever you took your mortgage out, that's called buying down your mortgage. And now, after you've proven that you are credible and giving that money, you can start paying interest on your mortgage at 5%. That's called buying down. And again, with a loan from a public bank to a community bank, that facilitates the buying down of interest rates. Development loans refer to, good example, your track and fields. If you want to revamp your local gym, if you want to redo your VDC, your public municipal auditorium. These are going to be development loans that are more community focused, and there might not be a business. Like, you're not going to go down to your local cafe and they say, like, yes, we're going to invest in revamping the track and field, but that's more of an organization or a nonprofit idea, and that has the community in mind as well. And public banks, again, can facilitate that. Here, when it says saves financial project financing costs, the financing of finding a contractor for revamping your municipal auditorium, revamping your track and field. You have to hire contractors, you have to hire appraisers, people to come out and assess the project, how much it's going to cost. And usually, ideally, you would pay someone locally who's a specialist in those areas. But sometimes it's cheaper to source them from out of town, which, besides transportation and lodging fees, those private companies can set a fee that isn't reasonable. And it's easy to exploit those at the county and state level. And you'll see that often in CalWorks, CalWater, PG&E. Another example that I really liked on the presentation that focused specifically on North Dakota's bank was North Dakota's bank started in 1919, and soon after they experienced a really horrible river disaster similar to the levee breaking in New Orleans. And it was a great illustration of the public banks, the benefits of this bank, because the river on both sides had access. One side requested aid from the government, such as FEMA, and the other side was local community volunteers. And those volunteers and those businesses that wanted to donate towels, donate brick and mortar, donate vehicles and gas and time to transporting people, transporting needed materials for reconstruction. They went through the public bank, and the time it took to revamp that side of the river compared to the time and the quality of that reconstruction was phenomenal. It was picture perfect demonstration of the difference between a black and white and a fuzzy image. Like I said, the people that gave this loan, Jedediah and Rick, gave this loan this talk. They want to create their own public bank. And one of the issues that I've seen in my own community was foreclosure. And foreclosure is avoidable if you have capital, and it's unavoidable if you have bad credit. And foreclosure will bring down the safety of different neighborhoods. It's easier. It's like squatter territory for an abandoned home. It doesn't look good next to your own home, and it drives down house prices, which, although they're already inflated, it's not a good thing, and it kicks people out of the community. And it's easy for bigger banks to buy up those homes and run to out-of-towners. And with a public bank, it can fund people to stay in their homes and not foreclose. Thank you guys for bearing with me. Thank you for listening. And any questions?
So, if we're interested in canceling our account with, like, say, Bank of America and moving it to a public bank, how do we do that?
Well, right now, there's only one public bank in all of America, and that is in North Dakota. And there are 20 states looking at creating a public bank. And California recently had an Assembly Bill 750, and that assembly bill looked at keeping, the assembly bill said, let's look at the benefits of a public bank. And Jerry Brown said, no, I'm actually interested in starting an assembly bill saying, let's create a public bank. So maybe soon here in California, we will have access to that. But right now, invest it in a credit union.
Write your senators, write your governor, what you want.
Do that, yeah. You know, last year's March and March really focused on, has anyone heard of the March and March? It's March on the Capitol. It's March 5th, and it's where, you don't even have to turn it back on. And it's where we all go to Sacramento and say, like, stop raising our tuition. We should be going to college for free. And it was the largest protest that they'd seen in, I was told decades, but I don't think that person who told me that had been even working in the Capitol for decades. But we saw an immediate reaction from the government, and that from that protest, there are more mandates for every class you have. A textbook must be available for free in your library, and further changes and lower tuition are being looked at from that. So when you say write your governor, write your senators, it can make a difference, but it is numbers, and it is getting the word out there and getting people mobilized together, dialogue. So investing in public banks, it will be possible. It's on the horizon, and if I have sparked some interest, which is what I was hoping to do today, continue to do research. If you don't know that the Federal Reserve is actually privately owned, like, go check that out, because that alone will blow your mind and facilitate some more fire.
So these public banks are just kind of focused on giving out loans to students and small business owners and individuals, right?
Exactly, that's the goal. And again, I want to illustrate that they are a banker's bank. So that means I'm a public bank, and this is a community bank, and you're a student, and you're going to request a loan from the community bank. And the community bank is restricted by, right now, the Dodd-Frank Act, that it has to maintain a certain amount of capital. And if you want 100,000, and for me to stay within that ratio, I can give you 90, but that's not enough. They can ask me for 10,000, and that's sweet because I only have to give them that full 100,000, and you get your loan. And that is an intention, because then maybe you use part of that to keep your credit up, and then that keeps the credit line flowing. Or maybe you'll use that to pay your rent, and then once you've got rent taken care of, you'll be able to invest in your farmer's market. It is about small scale.
And I'm sorry. Yeah, so are you a lot lighter on the credit restrictions in terms of giving out these loans?
What's that?
Public banks, are you a lot lighter?
Me? They?
The public banks, when they look at your credit and they're giving out these loans, are they a lot more lenient compared to these other banks?
What they are is they demand, for example, for a business, they demand a meticulous business plan. But if you are a visionary, you're going to have that anyways, because it is such a low level. It's so rooted that that's required. So it's not necessarily that they're more lenient. They want that. They want the money in the locals' pockets, because that means locals can invest locally. So it's not necessarily lenient. It's more abundant for the right cause. Because, again, Wall Street, the B of A, Wells Fargo, is investing leniently our money in places like, I'm saying John Deere, just because I can see a big green tractor on a monoculture field, and that's not my choice, that's not my garden. And but that's where my money is leniently being loaned out to. And but they would never, like a B of A would not invest in my favorite coffee shop, or my favorite coffee shop's Ethiopian coffee plantation. But if I had a way to make that investment, a business plan, I could talk to a public bank, or I could talk to my community bank that would have dialogue with the public bank. Again, and I make those two stories as two comparisons, because each public bank will be set up differently in those respects of who has the dialogue. It depends on how big the public bank can get. But isn't going to get that big because then it wouldn't be local.
So you talked a lot about like moving like personal money into things like this. Can like institutions like universities invest in public banks or other banks that they can invest in?
They absolutely could. One thing that's really cool about public banks that I didn't want to talk on because I don't have the buzzwords for them, but what I recall is that shareholders. So if you are investing in, well, like I said, the Federal Reserve is actually a corporation, right? It's not a printing press, it's a corporation. And I could be a shareholder in that. I would rather be a shareholder in my community bank. If a public bank sees that I'm a shareholder in that, oh my God, what was your initial question? It can't, okay, a university has investments, stocks in these big companies. Yeah, a university could borrow from a public bank and buy stock, become a shareholder in either the public bank or the community bank. And again, that generates the capital that it needs to maintain that ratio. And I keep talking about the ratio only because that is a major restriction right now that the Dodd-Frank, that on the shallow surface was supposed to facilitate economic growth, but actually restricted it at the local level. And say that didn't pass, it's still, the banks still don't have the capital to make those loans. But yeah, if universities could become shareholders in those banks, they could definitely invest that way. You guys, I really want to say that I tried to prepare well for this, and I tried to make this really clear. I tried to flow with it because I feel like that is a natural way our minds work. And did I get the message across? Thanks a lot for your interest, and I hope you guys can make it to another workshop soon. And that's all for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.